Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Hey, how you doing? Is your email working again yet? Check, 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 check. Testing 1, 2.
Push that and push it on.
No, it is.
Well, good morning, and welcome to today's hearing on modernizing Social Security's information technology infrastructure. From seniors receiving Social Security benefits to young parents whose infants need Social Security numbers, Social Security's IT infrastructure touches on the lives of nearly every American. Hundreds of computer programs, thousands of servers, and millions of lines of computer code make up Social Security's IT. But even though it's so important, Social Security's IT hasn't kept up with the advances in technology. Today, when smartphones are common, Social Security still relies on computer code so outdated they don't even teach it in classrooms, unless you all teach some of it. So Social Security has to spend time and resources training workers in ancient computer languages like COBOL, or rehire retirees to update its programs because they're the only ones who know how. Social Security has new hardware, new computers, and new data centers, but their software's out of date and hadn't been updated in years. Looking at a computer in a Social Security field office, you might think you'd been transported back to the 80s. Social Security still has many green screen programs. For those of you who may not remember, an example of a green screen is on the TVs. I can't tell you the last time I saw one of those, and as we will hear today, this old technology makes it difficult to keep younger workers who grew up using lots of technology. And worse, there's a true cost to the old technology because it takes Social Security employees longer than it should to do a simple task. That's time that can't be spent helping another claimant, processing earnings, information on disability insurance beneficiaries, or answering the phone. We'll hear today Social Security's employees lose 20 minutes each day due to technology problems. With an agency as large as Social Security, this adds up quickly. And this wasted time costs Social Security nearly $200 million each year. For years, I've been sounding the alarm on the state of Social Security's outdated and aging IT. And the good news is Social Security has finally recognized it has a problem. In this year's President's budget, Social Security admitted the patchwork approach isn't working and it's time to overhaul the entire system. And today we'll learn how Social Security plans to take on this massive program. Won't be easy, but Social Security has to get it right, and the American people expect nothing less. But we will also hear today that Social Security's track record isn't always good when it comes to IT. Social Security has been trying for years to develop the Disability Case Processing System, DCPS, a single piece of software that will be used by state employees when deciding disability cases. The experience with DCPS has been rough for taxpayers and doesn't inspire all that much confidence. While it seems the project must be getting on track, you can't just ignore $300 million in taxpayer dollars spent on a failed approach before Social Security decided to just start over. Yet Social Security had no problem asking for $300 million to redo its entire IT system without sharing a plan for how it was going to do it. The same amount that they spent on DCPS with nothing to show for it. The American people have the right to be skeptical. Trust is something that is earned, and it's earned by plans that can be followed, staying within a budget, and getting the job done on time, if not early. Make no mistake, Social Security must modernize its IT infrastructure, but they have to do it responsibly. This cannot be some runaway project with costs spiraling out of control, or a few years from now starting over from scratch after spending hundreds of millions of dollars. Social Security has to get it right. the first time. Thank you all for being here. I'll now recognize Mr. Becerra for his opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and thanks to our witnesses for being here. The Social Security Administration has an indispensable job ensuring that all Americans get their earned Social Security benefits on time and in the correct amount. No agency serves more Americans with more critical services and activities than the Social Security Administration. 1 in 4 American families receives income from Social Security. Last year, SSA, the Social Security Administration, ensured that more than 60 million Americans were paid their earned Social Security benefits, that they completed more than 8 million new applications, benefit applications, that they served more than 40 million in-person visitors and received over 66 million calls to over 1,200 field offices nationwide. SSA's IT was state-of-the-art when it was developed, and SSA has, over its history, repeatedly harnessed technology to improve efficiency, productivity, and customer service. But that was then. SSA had state-of-the-art systems in the 1970s, but today, those legacy systems are increasingly obsolete. They are expensive to maintain, prone to breakdown, and difficult to reprogram. Modernizing SSA's IT infrastructure has been a challenge, as budgetary constraints have limited the agency's ability to invest beyond maintaining its current systems and implementing small upgrades to its existing infrastructure. Since 2010, the Social Security Administration's basic operating budget has been cut by 10% after adjusting for inflation. At the same time, the number of beneficiaries has continued to steadily increase, rising by 7 million people since 2010. These cuts have squeezed all aspects of the agency's operations, including its capacity to keep its IT up to date. I'm glad that SSA is making a thoughtful assessment of its current IT infrastructure and determining what it will need to bring it up to date. But none of this can happen without resources. Without an additional investment from Congress dedicated to building a modern, agile, and cost-efficient IT infrastructure, SSA systems will become even more slow, expensive to maintain, and at risk of catastrophic failure. I'm glad one of our witnesses, Rick Warsinski, is here today to tell us real-world effects of the agency's aging IT systems. Rick represents the managers of more than 1,200 Social Security field offices and teleservice centers. His workers report that they lose about 20 minutes a day to computer problems. It can take 10 minutes to restart a computer and get back online, sometimes while the beneficiary is standing there waiting. But despite these clear problems, just yesterday, the House Appropriations Committee approved a bill that cuts the agency's fiscal year 2017 operating budget below what it received this year in 2016. It cuts it by over $263 million, which means that it's a cut of about $1.2 billion for the agency that more than it needs to be able to do its work on time. Mr. Chairman, we all have work to do. SSA has important work to do. Congress has work to do to help them out as well. I hope that we recognize it's a chance for us to help the Social Security Administration do what it must for the tens of millions of people who rely on the agency, and not only rely on it, but paid taxes into Social Security to make sure that they got the service and the work out of the agency that is necessary for these folks, these tens of millions of Americans who work very hard for this country, to get their benefits that they earned. And so it's time for us to work together with the Social Security Administration to make sure that they have the resources and the talent to provide all Americans who paid into the system the services that they deserve, the type of treatment they expect. And so when they call on that 1-800 number, or if they go visit an office, they will be treated with respect. They will be treated with dignity, because they will know that their government, our country, is working for them. And so I'm very glad that our witnesses are here with us today. Look forward to their testimony, and look forward, Mr. Chairman, to working with you and all our colleagues here in this committee to make sure that we can get this done on behalf of the American people. With that, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra. You know, I've never been in a Social Security office that they haven't been friendly, kind, courteous, and very efficient. As is customary, any member is welcome to submit a statement to the hearing record. Before we move on to our testimony today, I want to remind our witnesses to please limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. However, without objection, all of the written testimony will be made part of the hearing record. We have 5 witnesses today. Seated at the table are Robert Klopp, Deputy Commissioner, Chief Information Officer, Social Security Administration. Richard Borzinski, President, National Council of Social Security Management Association. Kimberly Bird, Deputy Assistant Inspector General for Audit, Financial System, and Operation Audits, Office of the Inspector General, Social Security Administration. Valerie Melvin, Information Management and Technology Resources Issues, Government Accountability Office. William Hayes, Principal Engineer, Software Engineering Institute, Carnegie Mellon University. So welcome to all of you for being here, and Mr. Klopp, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Becerra, and members of the subcommittee. As I was introduced, I'm Rob Klopp. I am the CEO and Deputy Commissioner of Systems at the Social Security Administration. I want to provide testimony to you directly from the plan that we've put together and presented to you guys. By the way, a plan that I'd like to put into the record right now, because I think that's really the point of this, is what we're going to try to do going forward. So if you could get the plans out that we provided to you and maybe open to page 5, I'm going to skip very quickly through what I think are the key parts of this plan. Page 5 basically describes the outcomes that we believe will be the result of IT modernization at Social Security. You know, importantly, it's important to think about, you know, IT modernization really, just the very definition of it is really about technical outcomes. It's about modernizing technology and stuff like that. And so there are some really important things that are outcomes out of that sort of a modernization effort. We think that we can move to cloud computing and substantially reduce the cost of compute and storage and the ongoing costs of operating the agency. We think that there are some technical techniques that we can use called service-oriented architectures that allow us to build software in a way that makes it easier to extend it as new policies and ideas. For example, some of the stuff that came out of the balanced budget amendment out of you guys, as those things come out, we think that we can more easily and more cost-effectively implement that stuff. We think that we can build shared services so that some of the things that we do can be shared with other agencies of the government, and also that we can share what some of those other agencies are doing if we have modern technology at the core. And finally, if we build analytics into the things that we build at a fundamental level, we will be able to be more data-driven in our decision-making, and we'll also be much more responsive to the data-driven requests that come from you all. So there are critical technology outcomes that come from IT modernization. Most probably important to you is going to be around cost reduction. But if we go about modernizing IT infrastructure, it's really important that we not miss the opportunity to also modernize the business processes, the fundamental way that we engage with the citizens. This probably adds a little bit of cost and expense to just modernizing the foundational stuff, but I think that we have to do that going forward. So on page 5, you'll also see that we believe that if we modernize IT and we take advantage of this effort to actually change the way we do business, that we have the ability to potentially reduce overpayments, that we have the ability to improve sort of the automatic programmatic quality assurance systems that we have in place that improve the quality of the services we deliver, that, as was already noted, that we can improve the productivity of the employees to the benefit of the citizens, you know, by reducing wait times and stuff like that. We believe that, very importantly, we can do more self-service applications so that citizens can engage with us more directly and not have to come to field offices in the first place. We have giant processing centers in Social Security, and to a large extent, the processing centers are in place today to handle all of the things that our legacy software doesn't handle. So every edge case, every outlier that pops up in the system ends up going to these processing centers and is handled manually. We believe that with IT modernization, we can eliminate some of that manual processing completely. And finally, we think that by applying, we think that we can apply technology in order to actually help us with some of the decisions that we have to make, and that will allow us to be more effective at things like adjudications. So importantly, there are outcomes that come out of IT modernization, some of which are technical, but to a large extent, the more important ones have to do with business outcomes. And it's important that we don't miss the business outcomes because we title the way we talk about this stuff IT modernization, which might otherwise imply just technology. If you skip to the next page on the scope of what we want to go after, you can see that we're going to go after the heart of the systems that are in Social Security Administration. The scope includes a complete rewrite of Title II systems, of Title 16 systems, of our notices application, which is how we currently communicate with the citizens of the country. Numerations is our application that we use to actually create Social Security cards and stuff like that. And earnings, which is how we keep track of the monies that people have available to them to help determine how much their benefits might be. We think that we can go after these 5 applications as the scope of modernization and fundamentally change the way we engage with citizens. Importantly, we also want to modernize and reduce some of the costs of our back office. So in our plan is an attempt to actually take our email infrastructure and move it out of our in-house data centers into the cloud for further cost reductions there. Page 7, I think, is what's most important and probably the newest part of this plan. And that is that we've built a roadmap that basically addresses how we think we're going to go about modernizing these 5 applications. You know, it'd probably take more than I can get through in 5 minutes to talk about this stuff, but I want you to know that the work we put into coming up with these estimates, you know, when we walked out of the room, people looked at me and said, this is probably the best that we've ever done as an agency in trying to estimate in advance what the GSA would call a rough order of magnitude, which is all as expected at this stage. So we think that these estimates are extremely accurate, and we feel really, really confident that we can actually do what's on this chart. Slide 8 basically talks about our approach, which is about...
Can you tie it down? Your time's expired already.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I just want to say we're going to approach this with agile methods, and I think you guys know something about that. That gives us, this is really the key to being able to do this in a completely different way than how we addressed DCPS before, and that's why we think we'll have different results. And then finally, I just want to say that Agile creates some interesting challenges in the way you implement oversight, and we believe that in this plan that we have provided mechanisms to allow that oversight to happen, even though it will be agile, and that the mechanisms will help you guys keep on top of us to make sure that this is not another DCPS thing. I'll just sort of wrap by saying we think that we are going to approach this fundamentally differently than the DCPS thing before. We think that we're proving through some other things that we're doing that we can affect these approaches, and that you know, we deserve the confidence because of these things that we've done in the last year to prove this, that we can actually go move forward and make this happen.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Byrd. Okay. Mr. Warzinski, would you like to testify, please? You're recognized.
Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Becerra, and members of the subcommittee, my name is Rick Warsinski, President of the National Council of Social Security Management Associations. Our organization represents field office and teleservice center management nationwide. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. My testimony will focus on why modernizing SSA's IT infrastructure is essential from the perspective of over 60,000 employees and even more importantly, to the customers we serve. Ask any SSA employee what their number one concern is, and most will tell you it is the frustration they face getting their job done due to our slow system. Daily, we wait as our computers crawl from one system's window to another. Around noon Eastern Time, our system reaches peak usage as almost all offices are open to serve the public. Users watch the spinning wheel as programs and screens attempt to load. Valuable time is lost, which should be used to assist customers or address backlogs. Based on our recent survey, we believe this costs the agency upwards of $200 million per year in lost productivity. We can demonstrate the degradation of SSA systems by analyzing data speed tests. We surveyed our offices and found that these tests measured a median download speed of 2.87 megabits per second and an upload speed of 0.25 megabits per second. This speed is slower than what we measured last year. In comparison, internet providers typically provide over 20 times the speed in your home. This degradation in data speed supports overwhelming feedback that our system is slowing down. Our customer service and productivity are not only dependent on reliable systems access, but also on efficient programs. SSA programs are becoming more complex and experiencing more malfunctions. Our computers regularly become non-responsive, applications inaccessible, requiring a system reboot. It could take up to 10 minutes to restart a computer to get back online. We strongly support resources for modernizing SSA's code and rewriting its programs. SSA systems require new architecture. We understand modernizing SSA's computer systems will require resources and time. However, failure to address these critical concerns will delay the inevitable and cost will only increase. In the meantime, severe disruptions of service will intensify as the system further degrades. Our agency touches every American. We maintain billions of records, paying out nearly $1 trillion a year. Payments must be made accurately to ensure tax dollars are not wasted. The current, inefficient, outdated system cannot keep pace with the services SSA must deliver each day, costing us millions of dollars. We acknowledge there are budget challenges to addressing SSA's IT infrastructure needs, especially considering SSA's increasing workloads, which include a record high hearings backlog of over 1.1 million cases waiting for a decision. These cases represent vulnerable citizens facing the possibility of homelessness and severe health deterioration, often without the means to pay for care. SSA's program service centers have a near record high pending backlog of over 2.8 million cases with an average age of 4 months. These centers are responsible for workloads that usually require manual processing due to limitations in SSA software. The American public deserves an SSA with adequate resources to support the agency and its systems. We recognize budget dollars are limited. However, we strongly believe dedicated and sustained resources for the modernization of SSA's IT infrastructure are necessary to ensure the agency can run efficiently, saving tax dollars. The longer we delay addressing these issues, the more severe disruptions will occur, risking major systems outages. Thank you again for this opportunity to testify. I would welcome any questions you have.
Thank you, sir. You know, we built 2 computer systems brand new not too long ago. That was supposed to solve all your problems. Thank you, Ms. Bird. You're recognized.
Good morning, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Becerra, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the invitation to testify today. SSA administers programs that result in payments of $2.5 billion per day.
You want to bring the mic a little closer?
Yep, will do. And holds sensitive data for more than 300 million people. Given SSA's increasing service and data storage responsibilities, the agency must modernize its IT infrastructure. It is a significant challenge to upgrade the IT systems that an organization as vast as SSA needs to conduct business. However, the agency must make IT modernization a top priority. The need for long-term IT planning has been a concern at SSA for many years. As far back as 1982, SSA announced aggressive plans to restructure and upgrade its systems. At the time, the agency told Congress that without major IT improvement, SSA could suffer a disruption of services which are critical for millions of Americans. Despite upgrading several systems, SSA is yet to tackle some of its major IT projects, such as replacing its legacy programming code and databases. Specifically, SSA continues to rely on decades-old applications to process core workloads, such as retirement and disability claims. Many of the agency's applications run on COBOL, a programming code first developed more than 55 years ago. Further, SSA's workforce, while proficient and experienced, is aging. Thus, institutional knowledge of older technologies is diminishing due to retirement. Modernization is critical because SSA's next generation of employees will expect to work with current mainstream technologies. In its Information Resources Management Strategic Plan, SSA outlines general multi-year efforts to modernize data so it exists in forms that are widely used today, rewrite business applications with modern coding so those applications could interact with SSA's online and mobile services, and move servers to environments like the cloud that could increase efficiency. All of these efforts are worthwhile. But going forward, SSA should describe specifically how and when it will bring these ideas to fruition. Long-term strategic planning is critical to any significant IT project. For example, the Disability Case Processing System, or DCPS, is one of SSA's largest active IT investments. SSA began planning this project in 2008. During development, DCPS has incurred cost overruns and schedule delays. After developments resulted in limited functionality and user concerns, SSA reset the project last year and changed its approach. The agency moved DCPS to an agile environment, which is expected to deliver software updates incrementally. Agile practices are relatively new to SSA. Implementing them on a project as complex as DCPS could introduce additional risks. At the end of fiscal year 2015, SSA reported it had spent more than $350 million on DCPS. Going forward, the project requires diligent oversight and continued user involvement. Also, any IT modernization plan should address SSA system security. In our most recent FSMA report, we identified a number of weaknesses that may limit SSA's ability to adequately protect its systems. The risk and severity of these weaknesses met OMB's definition of a significant deficiency in internal controls, a conclusion that we have reached in prior FSMA reports. SSA needs to address these weaknesses to protect its information systems, just as the agency works to ensure the integrity of its benefit programs. To conclude, SSA needs a detailed IT plan that clearly outlines how it will modernize its databases, applications, and infrastructure so agency employees can work effectively and SSA customers can receive timely, accurate services. Of course, we will continue to monitor these issues closely and work with SSA and this subcommittee. Thank you again for the invitation to testify, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Melvin, welcome. Please
Thank you.
proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Becerra, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to testify on modernizing SSA's information technology. As you know, the agency relies heavily on IT resources to accomplish its mission. And as has been emphasized, SSA's IT environment is aging, with the agency reporting that some of its systems are more than 30 years old. Over the years, SSA has undertaken various projects aimed at updating and improving its systems and infrastructure. And as noted today, it recently announced a new plan to pursue the an agency-wide modernization initiative. Our prior reports on SSA's IT identified numerous challenges that impeded the agency's ability to effectively manage and modernize its IT. And at your request today, my testimony summarizes results from those reports. Further, in anticipation of the new modernization initiative, the testimony highlights selected practices that we have identified as essential to effectively planning for and managing modernization efforts. Overall, our prior work identified weaknesses in SSA's systems development practices, IT governance, requirements management, and strategic planning, among other areas. For example, we previously noted that the agency had proceeded with implementing an earlier disability system without consistently applying established procedures to guide the system's development, and without conducting adequate testing to evaluate the performance of all system components collectively. Additionally, the agency's IT modernization approach had not included an updated IT strategic plan to guide its efforts. Weaknesses such as these hindered SSA's ability to successfully deliver the new capabilities. We made numerous recommendations to address the weaknesses we identified, and the agency agreed with some, but not all of them. Overall, the agency has continued to be challenged in its efforts and currently faces increasing costs to operate and maintain its at-risk legacy systems. Our work has shown that successfully acquiring and modernizing IT depends on federal agencies, including SSA, having effective management and oversight processes in place. Otherwise, investments frequently fail, incur cost overruns and schedule slippages, or contribute little or to the mission's related outcomes. With this in mind, we have identified a set of essential and complementary management disciplines that provide a sound foundation to support IT modernization efforts. These include, among others, strategic planning to define what an organization seeks to accomplish and how it will achieve the desired results, IT investment management that includes an investment board and effective investment oversight, systems development and acquisition practices that include defining the requirements, managing project risk, and reliably estimating costs, and leadership for driving change, providing oversight, and ensuring accountability for results. Given the long-standing challenges with its IT management and modernizations, it is important for SSA to have in place a clearly established, rigorous, and disciplined approach for its latest efforts to modernize its IT. The management disciplines noted provide a sound foundation for doing so. Otherwise, challenges like those that SSA experienced in its past initiatives could continue to be an impediment to the agency achieving the more modernized IT environment necessary to support its service delivery mission. This concludes my oral statement, and I would be pleased to respond to your questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Hayes, welcome. You may proceed.
Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Becerra, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. Is this my name is Will Hayes, and I'm a member of a research team at the Software Engineering Institute, a federally funded research and development center operated by Carnegie Mellon University. For over 7 years, we've been working with major software-intensive programs across the government where a great deal of experience is accumulating about Agile. My testimony today will focus not on the Social Security Administration, but on what we at the Software Engineering Institute have learned about Agile development in government settings. Our research encompasses both successful and failures in applying Agile approaches. In our work as a federally funded research and development center, it is our goal to help others benefit from this experience base. It bears mentioning at the outset, Agile cannot solve all your IT transformation problems. As you may know, Agile software development is typified by small cross-functional teams working in short iterations to deliver software capabilities incrementally. Our research in large programs indicates that there are several factors that are essential to successful application of Agile development at scale. Effective communication between leadership and developers, alignment on strategy across teams and roles, and a workforce experienced in the disciplined application of software engineering methods such as architectural analysis, cybersecurity practices, and building sustainable systems, among other things. Make no mistake, to consistently deliver working software on a short time frame, and to do this over the course of months or years, requires a tremendous amount of discipline and ongoing planning. For those charged with oversight responsibilities, we must recognize that Agile at scale is different from traditional approaches, and this process requires a different approach to oversight. Agile methodologies place a premium on consistent use of short iterations with stable staffing dedicated to a single stream of technical work. This new cadence offers more oversight opportunity, but with different measures of success. For example, short-term deviations in cost and schedule are much less likely to occur under such a regime. Leading indicators of performance that rely strictly on a cost and schedule information will not serve us the way they have in the past. We will need to understand performance in terms of delivered value rather than resources consumed. In Agile, there's a strong emphasis on uncovering user needs for the system through collaborative interaction. Given this focus, we have the opportunity to assess the quality of the software products based on how well they support the mission of the user base. This focus on quality in terms of user value is seen by many to be superior to an exclusive focus on software defects and technical debt. Agile moves the focus away from reliance on detailed and comprehensive specifications as the primary way of assessing the technical challenge to be solved. Incremental development allows teams to hone their understanding of real user needs as the system is implemented in waves. Agile development emphasizes full resolution visibility into near-term work and a less detailed focus on the work to be done later. This approach to managing the inevitable change in what we demand of our IT systems, when implemented with strong leadership and a well-considered roadmap, has helped government programs to deliver systems that are better suited to their intended use. There are a number of potential challenges to using Agile approaches in government settings that still remain. First, it is not yet clear how we will build the capacity for government personnel to interact more frequently with developers. Our federal workforce must continue to accomplish more each year with limited ability to add resources. Second, government personnel overseeing software systems must be able to consider broad-reaching impacts of their technical strategy over the long term. A focus on short-term technical goals to the exclusion of a sense of building for the future can be a destructive force. This can inappropriately constrain the budgetary decisions we must make. Lastly, we must continue to battle the recurring software challenges that have been pervasive for decades. This includes managing technical debt and making timely modernization investments. We have a long tradition of deferred maintenance to overcome. Just as we might worry about the condition of roads and bridges in our country, we need to be mindful of the work we defer in our software systems. In conclusion, I would like to suggest two broad focus areas for government on these matters. First, we need to start asking different questions about software systems in which we invest. We need to focus on what the software system enables and how the work supported by the system is improved by the capabilities we deploy. Second, a focused workforce development effort is needed to develop the skills necessary to utilize these new methodologies. It's an honor to participate in this process, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you would have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Seems like we should have gone over all those things when we built the new systems, right? Mr. Klopp, the President's budget requested $300 million to modernize Social Security. And after asking for months for a plan, this week Social Security finally provided something to the Congress. Given that Social Security already wasted $300 million on the disability case processing system, before starting over, money taxpayers can't get back, I want to ask you, are you confident that the proposed $300 million will cover the entire modernization project as the budget claims?
I mean, first, I guess I just get out of the way the fact that the DCPS stuff and the $300 million that was spent before I got here, right? What I did was, about 9 months ago, started the agency on a path to build the plan, which is now in front of you. And as you can imagine, building a plan as comprehensive as a plan to modernize all of the IT infrastructure in 9 months is not a bad effort. The plan has been in continuous improvement, and you know, frankly, we have briefed your staff continuously over the course of that 9 months, so there's really very little in the plan that was new and a surprise. What was new was the roadmap and cost model that we built into the plan. And so I'm hoping that later on we'll have some questions that will let me go into that in more detail. What I will tell you is that the cost model also has been built up iteratively over the course of the last 9 months. We believe at this stage that the model that we've put together and the commitments that are implied by the roadmap that are in the plan are something that is extremely high quality. We worked very hard to create what GSA would call a rough order of magnitude estimate that is extremely high fidelity. So we think that we can do what's in the plan. We believe that the effort that we put into building up those cost models is a level of effort that is not usually seen in the government in building a rough order of magnitude, and you know, I pretty much stand behind it.
Well, are you protecting taxpayer dollars, I guess is what the question is, and are you going to stay on budget?
You know, I think we are going to stay on budget. I think, you know, one of the things that Mr. Hayes said that I think is really important to keep in mind is that in this new agile world, what we focus on is trying to deliver value every time we go through an iteration, an agile iteration. And so we think that the agile process is going to allow you to look at the things that we have in the backlog, the amount of money that we're spending as a run rate, and at a very regular interval be able to determine whether or not we're adding the value with these increments that we claim we're adding. I think that agile is less about defining an end point and drive in advance and driving to that end point and then declaring that we've hit something on time and on budget. So we're going to use agile. We're going to expect you to watch over us like a hawk, and we think that we will be able to consistently deliver value through this entire plan.
Okay, let me ask you a little different question. You know, you're a political appointee, and that means January. Are you going to leave Social Security?
We'll see, right? I mean,
Well,
I don't have a long-term contract, right?
What are
So-
you doing? What are you doing to make sure that this project stays on track once you leave?
So we think that we have, you know, detailed plans that we're going to put in place, but, you know, right now we're at the stage where the detailed plans is highly dependent on the $300 million request we have for additional funding. If we don't get the $300 million, I think that the plan really completely unravels. We're undergoing some pretty severe budget cuts, and it's going to impact IT, I think, more than anywhere else. So I don't see much opportunity for us to take on IT modernization without the additional funding.
Thank you. Ms. Bird and Ms. Melvin, you've seen the impact of turnover in Social Security, and what else should be done to make sure the taxpayer dollars are not wasted? Either one of you.
Yeah, so I'll go first. From the OIG perspective, what we really want is a long-term plan. We can't have an annual plan that then goes away. As I mentioned in my oral testimony, SSA has gone back 25 years in saying that this must happen. And we're now here again today discussing this modernization effort. So what we would like to see is a very detailed plan going forward that is sustained. beyond 1 year or beyond one administration.
Yeah, well, you know, when we built those two processing buildings, they told us that was the end of the problem. And it hadn't seemed to happen. I'm out of time. I'm going to recognize Mr. Becerra. Thank you for your comments.
Chairman, thank you for this hearing, and I hope we're able to follow it up with more, because I think it's become very clear that we need to do something, but we have to make sure that whatever that something is, it's going to work. May I suggest, Mr. Chairman, we were just chatting a second ago, that we try to bring together the Inspector General's office, GAO's office, who are our watchdogs, sit them down with Mr. Klopp and his folks, and that we, the members of Congress, those of us who sit on this committee of jurisdiction, we get to sit with you all to hear what's going on, because if you're going to ask for the money, I think we want to have a sense that it's going to work. And as Ms. Bird just said, this is a long-term project. And as Mr. Klopp just said, you're going to need the money. You can't do a long-term project without knowing you got a stable source of funding to make it happen. And so I think what you're probably going to hear from this dais is that people want to know that if you're going to get the money, there will be a product that works at the end. And I don't think we have much more time to wait or waste, right? Because my understanding is it's getting worse every day. You're running out of broadband. Your folks are taking longer to access information, and you're getting more and more people coming through the doors of Social Security's offices. And so I think it becomes really important for us to work on. It's almost like diving out of the plane together. We all have to trust that we'll all know how to pull each other's parachute string at the right time, and we can't afford failure. Is not an option if we're all hanging together. I think it's also going to be important, as Mr. Hayes has testified, to have someone from the outside, especially those who are doing this and have done it well, to instruct us, because sometimes we get in our shells and don't recognize all the best technologies that are out there, or some of the failures that can inform us. Ms. Bird and Ms. Melvin, do you think your offices would be willing, if the chairman and members on this committee were interested in sitting down, not necessarily having to do a hearing, but just to sit down and to have a working group, that your offices would be willing to participate in that?
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely we could.
Okay. Mr. Klopp, I don't know if you can speak for everyone at Social Security, but would you be interested in participating in something like that? Would your folks at SSA sign off on allowing you to have additional meetings with members of Congress who are interested in following up with you on this?
Absolutely. I think we've already tried to engage with your staff much more effectively than maybe has been going on in the past.
Mr. Wierzinski, do you think that would be something that the folks who actually have to do this on the ground that you represent would be supportive of?
Very much so. I think that's the key, is everyone getting together and being on the same page and going the same direction.
And Mr. Hayes, I'm assuming that you think it's better to look from the inside versus from the outside at how this is happening, because all of us, whether we're in the federal government or not, are going to deal with Social Security at some point in our lives.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, I would really urge us to really see if we can sit down, whatever you all think is a good group, to just try to follow this up, because I think the chairman's admonition is absolutely correct. We can't afford to have someone come up here and say you need the resources to, whether it's to have those new buildings that we're going to house a lot of the IT capabilities move forward, then all of a sudden find that it's just not cutting it. And I hope that what we'll do is we'll get a clear sense of the path on the budget numbers that you really need, because, well, as you just saw, that yesterday the Appropriations Committee actually cut SSA's budget, and as I think Mr. Klopp, you mentioned, it'd be impossible to move forward on any IT improvement if your budget is cut. And so I think people are going to demand some real precise numbers to feel comfortable about allocating the resources for this without taking it from another very important aspect of Social Security Administration's work. The last thing we want to do is take it from Peter to give it to Paul. Is there something, Mr. Wierzinski, that we should know that the frontline folks would like members of Congress to know in terms of how we can do this and do it right?
I think, as I was saying on my testimony, that our biggest concern right now is that we're just as we interview the public, every member walks in, they're waiting longer, our interviews are taking longer. Every part of our work is there's a frustration building because especially in the middle of the day where you're just waiting for things to move. And the Social Security employee is really under the gun to use every second they can, and they need to use every second. It's very frustrating when they can't use the time they have to do something.
Appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing. Thank you all to all the witnesses for their testimony.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Klopp, how far along would you say you are in this plan? I mean, there was the assertion made previously that some of the documentation and so forth is brand new. How far along would you say you are?
So I've been at SSA for about 18 months and really started, it's so apparent the minute you get there that IT modernization is almost an existential problem. We have about 37% of our staff will be eligible to retire in the next 5 years. So this is something we jumped on right away. What we've done in the last 18 months is sort of start the cultural change to get our heads wrapped around Agile. As Mr. Hayes points out, the workflow or workforce cultural change like that is critically important. But we also started working on the technology. So we're now at a point where we're rolling out our first production applications in the cloud. We're building applications using very modern software languages like Node.js and we're using Agile in an agile way. I think we're doing well at that. So a lot of the 18 months has been sort of prep to be in a position where we could actually go execute on the plan. The plan itself has really probably grown up, I'm going to say, in the last 8 months. And that basically started when we asked ourselves, what would we do if we were going to completely rewrite systems and engage customers in a completely different way? So we started a project that we call Customer Connect. And really the major upgrade that I mentioned, the roadmap and costing, was only, we could only really do that without just making really big, ridiculous swags in the last few weeks as the Customer Connect team developed for us descriptions of the business processes that drive the whole agency. So the answer, I think, is that we have a toehold, we have a beachhead, the workforce is learned enough to be able to move forward on this thing, and really we're just waiting for the funding.
So the funding, would you say, is the largest obstacle?
Yeah, it is. We have to have the funding, right?
So once you get the funding, do you see any other obstacles changing or evolving along the way?
Well, I mean, it's never going to be perfect, right? But I don't look, we think that we can do this. The other thing I think that's important is we have turned DCPS around. We have turned it around by using all these agile modern methods. And it's really DCPS and our ability to develop code in DCPS that's become the yardstick that allows us to come up with these estimates. We believe, now knowing the kind of velocity that we can get out of programmers in a modern environment and being able to relate the business problems we're solving in DCPS to the business problems that we have to solve if we modernize Title II, we can get this rough order of magnitude and say, yeah, it looks like about the same thing. So I actually don't believe that there's technical obstacles. I just think we got to get on with it.
And, in the federal government, as it relates to dollars being spent and so forth, there are oftentimes a lot of boxes that need to be checked. Oftentimes those don't have anything to do with quality or efficiency. Do you feel that you have the flexibility, that there's enough flexibility in the system or, in the surroundings, that there's enough flexibility to get the job done?
That's actually a really interesting question. I think you can actually see a little bit of tension at the table here between the agile side of the world, which is really about sort of get on with it, manage things in an iterative way, work very hard to make sure you're adding value with each iteration, as opposed to the counter view, which is we have to have detailed plans that lay everything out several years in advance and how we have to work to these detailed plans. Agile is about agility. It's not about prescriptive plans. And so what we've done is engage the IG and OMB and start trying to find a way to work in this Agile way and provide all the value that Agile provides, and still provide the kind of management oversight on top of this thing to make sure that we're delivering value as we go. But in the same way that it requires me to retrain my programming staff in how to deal with Agile and to deal with some of the cultural concepts that Mr. Hayes suggested, I think that also some of those cultural changes are going to have to impact the way we provide oversight on these things, and it's going to impact folks like GAO and the Inspector General's office.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank everybody for being here. Mr. Hayes, I'm from right above Pittsburgh, so I know the wonderful work that you've done. I'm from the private sector, and just as a lead into it, not only you, but all of us are going to find out in January if we're still here. So it doesn't really matter. We're all on temporary service. Coming from the private sector, though, and this is something I've watched now for 5 years I've been here, we're always trying to find out who to blame for things not working right. But in the private sector, in the business that I've been in my whole life, I would have the folks that I work with come to me and say, hey, there's a new machine we have to get. I'm an automobile dealer. We need to get this new paint room. And I'd say, how much does it cost? And they said, $250,000. And I said, well, how are we going to pay for it? And they said, well, there's a great loan program, or you can lease it. I said, no, that's not, how are we going to make the payments? Because if we don't have enough business to cover it, it doesn't make sense. So I would never buy anything that, if it didn't kill more than it ate, it couldn't come in the store. The problem that you face is huge because without more people participating, and I'm talking about now the labor rate participation, I'm not talking about unemployment, because people looking for jobs and not finding a job are the only ones considered unemployed. The people that don't have any hope and aren't even looking for a job aren't considered in the market anymore. But the real elephant in the room is not the program that you're trying to put forward. The real elephant in the room is the fact that we don't have enough revenue to continue to build a business model that would make sense in the private sector. Nobody in the private sector would sit there and say, you know what, this is a new program I'm going to institute. Let's go ahead with it, because the next question is who's going to pay for it. My understanding, and this is from signing payroll twice a month, 6.2% from the person that's out there working, 6.2% matched by the people who pay him or her, 12.4% out of every paycheck up to about $118,000. If we don't get more people back to work, if we don't have a dynamic and robust economy, all this talk that we're having is just that. It is just talk. You have, I think you have around 65,000 people working in Social Security right now. You need a lot of money to update. You need a lot of money to continue to grow. In our business, if we stop spending, we're going to die. We've got to constantly move all the time. Move up, ratchet up. What you're doing is making people more effective, more efficient through technology. That's the way you fix it. The question is, how do you pay for it? And I think too often we worry here about the political ramifications of who are we going to blame? Who are we going to blame for us not being able to get there? First of all, Social Security is a business. We have to have more money coming in than going out. It's just that simple. These are not hard things to figure out. And the question becomes, if we're going to have this conference all the time, and it's always a tit for tat and telling us who it is that's responsible for it not failing, the reason it's not working is because we don't have an economy that's functioning right now. You can't do a darn thing about that. We can through policy. We can look at things and say, why aren't we growing? Why aren't we fulfilling our full potential? And the answer in most cases is the private sector can't continue under the heavy burden of taxation and regulation and then being held responsible for not providing enough revenue to run the business. See, I look at it just that simple. And all the things you're trying to do are wonderful. But if we can't afford to pay for them, they never get done. So I think I would rather be looking at, I want to sit down and talk with you. I want to hear from you of how you could fix this, what you have to do to update, what you have to do to modernize. As you look at the growing number of people on Social Security, we have to make sure that we fulfill that promise to people. But we also have to make sure that the model isn't a flawed model that's not sustainable. Too many programs right now are unsustainable. They were unsustainable from their very concept. From the time they went into effect, they couldn't be held on that long. We knew we couldn't do it, but you know what? If we could just get through the next election, then we'd work on it again. So I appreciate everything you're doing. I mean this sincerely. Anybody gives you a hard time, listen, you're working for the same people we work for. That's hardworking American taxpayers. And they expect the flat level best from us every single day we come to work. So I don't want to blame you for anything. I want to work with you. I want to find out how to do it. But you know what? What you need to demand from us is not just more money to operate, but a stronger economy that can fund it, because I know where the money comes from. Every single penny comes from a hardworking American taxpayer who it's in their paycheck, it's matched by their employer, but it only matters if they're working. It only matters if their wages are rising. And all the rest of this is we're just chasing ourselves around about the real problem. The real problem in this country right now is an economy that's not growing. And with the assets that we have and the opportunities that we have facing us right now, if we really want to make America great again, then we have to have policies that allow America to be great again and don't hold us down. You need more money to operate, and we need to come up with policies that allow the people who fund this wonderful government, and that's the private sector, allow them to grow, allow them to succeed, allow them to be profitable, allow them to be a bigger participant when it comes to revenue, and you only do that through working to a mutual end that's beneficial for everybody. I have no questions from you because you're all on the right track. The question is who's going to pay for it, and the answer is labor force. We have more people working. That's where it comes from. It's not a mystery. The money does not come from the government. It comes from working people who pay taxes. We collect it and then we redistribute it. So, Chairman, thanks for having this. Mr. Becerra, I agree with you. Listen, if we can't fix this, shame on us. But the big thing we have to fix first is our tax system and regulation system, because the people that provide all the revenue are the people that we whip every day. We whip them every day, and we hold them responsible for not paying their fair share, and then we make it impossible for them to win. That just doesn't make sense to me, not from the world I come from. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Renacci. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for holding this hearing to further understand the Social Security Administration's IT infrastructure. I also want to thank the panel for their testimony, especially Mr. Warzinski, who I've had the opportunity to meet with in the past and discuss many of these issues that have been brought up today. Thank you for your service. Thank you for traveling here from Cleveland, and that everything you do for Northeast Ohio. I take great pride in the work that my office has done in Congress in helping Northeast Ohioans access their earned Social Security benefits. How oftentimes I hear from constituents about the struggles they're having with the Social Security Administration and how long that it takes for issues to be resolved. One example, Denise from Akron, Ohio, worked with my office for more than 6 months, have her claim resolved after spending 6 months on her own working with the Social Security Administration on her case. It's clear that the IT infrastructure must be dramatically improved in order for Social Security Administration to meet the needs of the American people. I was a business owner as well for 3 decades before I came here. In your testimony, Mr. Rosinski, you shared results from a SSA employee survey that showed just how frustrated Social Security Administration employers are with the current systems. It's clear the aging IT structure has not only reduced productivity, but negatively impacted the services the constituents receive. You know, it's interesting. Ultimately, frontline employees have to bear that burden. I saw the green screen, which I probably haven't seen since I was in college. And then you talked about COBOL, which I had to chuckle. I remember COBOL. I remember dropping the cards on the floor and have to pick all the cards back up and have to reshuffle them to make the program work. So I hope the COBOL you're talking about isn't the same one I was working on back in college, or we really have some problems at Social Security. But I can tell you that that has to be a problem in retaining high-quality employees. Mr. Rosinski, can you tell me how that, I mean, tell me some of the instances. Are you having problems, especially younger employees? What do they say when they see these screens and COBOL, things they've never probably even heard of?
It's interesting when we interview people that are starting out that we tell them that you only maybe know 1/millionth of what you're going to learn, because they're not, you don't go to college to learn what you get trained in Social Security. We have a completely unique system that we only do, and when they start working, they say, this is so convoluted. It's very hard for them to really comprehend. They spend a couple years really just trying to understand all the screens because it's so inefficient and it takes so much time. It's frustrating, and I think we lose staff, and it does affect our morale of many of the new staff members coming in, because they learned under a different system, just in the way they train. And we have issues with just doing online training now because we don't have the bandwidth, and we have to often download things overnight. But the kind of modern way we do training and go about our business is just not there. We're working in a very old system, and I think our staffs would really relish seeing this kind of plan that hopefully will provide a great deal of hope for our agency and for our public, in the next few years.
I would agree, and you just mentioned something about the speeds specifically declining, oftentimes outages throughout the workday that slow process down. Can you have any measure of the amount of productivity hours that are lost due to all of that?
Well, in our surveys, we found that on average, we're losing about 20 minutes per employee per day of productivity. Now, that's throughout the day, and that's everyone in the field offices. But, you know, I talk to people from all over the country, whether they work in a field office or in our headquarters or in the hearings offices or the payment centers, they all have the same frustration with the loss of time because their computers are slowing down and they're just waiting. So that adds up. I mean, all that time costs money. And then you build all this infrastructure in SSA with the buildings and everything else you pay. All of that is supporting the staff, and it's just not efficient use of our tax dollars. And, you know, we could do a lot more with less if we could improve this.
I think your last line was the most important one, and that's the one that I was getting at in the business world, which I was in, and you heard Mr. Kelly, and you know, infrastructure is important, and sometimes if you have the right infrastructure, we hate to say this, but you gain productivity, you don't need as many personnel, but one thing I've learned today, and I keep hearing, and I think most of the members here on the panel are agreeing that your infrastructure needs to be changed. But what we need to do is make sure that we spend it properly, because it is taxpayer money, and that we come up with a plan that works for the long term, not the short term. And I'd be willing to work in this group that Mr. Becerra talked about to come up together with a plan, working together to say, here's how much we're going to spend, here's why we need it, which I've had to do all my life in the business world. They'd come and say, I need to spend X amount of dollars on infrastructure. I'd said, okay, explain it to me, tell me how long it's going to last, tell me the product. These are the kind of things that would be important, because we are spending taxpayer dollars, but there's definitely a need. So I thank you all for your testimony. I yield back.
Mr. Rice, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start out with you, Mr. Hayes. Why is this so hard? I mean, I know there's a lot of records, but it's not like we're using this computer system to, you know, design a rocket ship or something. We're just keeping records, right? This is a database, right?
So the demands on how the data are used do evolve rather rapidly, and the ability to try to keep up with the operational use of the software systems can be very challenging. And so,
in other words, what you're saying is to replace it and keep the old one running at the same time is what makes it hard. Is that what you're saying? I mean, this is a database program.
So database structures have evolved. The technology that allows us to quickly access data, especially as the volume of data grows. The new technologies don't tend to work on old platforms because those old platforms didn't have in mind.
But you can convert it. I mean, you can
Yes, you
convert
can.
what you got.
Yes,
So
and it takes
I
effort
still
to
don't
do
understand
that.
why this is so difficult. Is it that the people that are running it are incompetent to get it done? Is that the problem?
Certainly not. It's been my experience. Most people who have jobs like these do this out of a sense of loyalty to the mission they serve. And so they are working as hard as they are able to in the structure they're working. And this is for men and women in uniform that defend our country, as well as those working in the offices you've heard described today.
Well, and certainly we want to make sure the men and women in uniform are well taken care of, and that the American public is, but we hear this threat that if we don't do something about this thing and get it modernized, then we can have disruptions in service, and it affects a lot of our GDP. I mean, what Social Security deals with every month. And what I'm frustrated with is sitting here reading these reports, and particularly yours, Mrs. Byrd, about the fact that we've spent $300 million here and $280 million here, and we're still using COBOL, for God's sake. Mr. I don't know how you say your name, Wazinski or
Warsinski.
How long have you been at Social Security?
A little over 40 years. 40.
40.
I've seen a lot of change.
Yeah. Well, COBOL. You hadn't seen that much change. You're still using COBOL, for God's sake.
When I started, we just had teletype machines, and we didn't even have dumb terminals.
Maybe we should go back to abacuses. I mean, I guess maybe there's some advantage to COBOL, because probably the hackers out today, they probably don't know how to hack into it, because they've never seen such antiquated stuff, right? What's your position there?
My position is
Yeah.
I'm the district manager in downtown Cleveland. And I'm also, that's my regular job. I am also president of the Social Security Management Association. But my regular job is I manage every day. I work with my staff. I hire. I see
Okay,
the
so you're
problems
not
they're
over
having.
IT. Miss Melvin, you are, right?
I am.
Mrs. Melvin, what's your position, Miss Melvin?
I would point to some underlying management
What's your position, Miss
problems.
Melvin?
Underlying management problems. We've noted over time that there are.
What
a
is your
number-
job, Mrs. Melvin?
What is my job?
Yeah.
I'm the Director for Information Technology with NGA.
So you're over IT.
Yes, I do look at IT issues. We audit them. Yes. Yeah, within GAO. I'm not with SSA.
Okay, so you don't control this, but you do, sir. How long have you been at Social Security?
18 months.
Are you not embarrassed about this COBOL? I mean, good grief.
Not embarrassed. I take it as a challenge, and it's my job to try to fix it, which is why I'm here.
Why is it so hard?
Well, yeah, I mean,
It's not like we're asking for, these incredibly advanced systems. I mean, this is a database system.
Well, I think, first off, it's more than a database. We make decisions about who gets disability from the data. We make decisions about who gets SSI, and we make decisions. I mean, there's lots of complexity in there. It's much more than just a database system.
Now, the COBOL system, that is the primary database, right? That's the central function, right? COBOL is what's the foundation on which this whole database is built, right?
COBOL is the business logic. The database itself is actually called DB2, and that's COBOL is where we put the business logic. DB2 is where we put the data.
We have heard about these problems modernizing computer systems, not just from y'all, but from the IRS as well, and I think other governmental entities as well. Why is it so much harder in government to modernize than it is in the private sector? Why is that so much more difficult?
Well, I think that there's two answers to that. One is, it's very interesting, there are some commercial industries, in particular the insurance industry, which is a close analogy to SSA anyway, that basically is not modernizing. They are sticking with COBOL, and they insist they're going to stick with COBOL. I find that to be a very odd stance, but there are several large insurance companies that are not modernizing. They're going to try to stick with what they've got. I think that the issue comes back to funding, and I think you guys are, by the way, are spot on when you talk about, how do you fund this? How do you get return on investment? How do we demonstrate that there is return on investment? I think what you're hearing from everybody today is that we know that there is return on investment. The question is, where do we come up with the investment?
Okay, I just have limited time. I'm probably out. But Mrs. Bird, you noted that we'd just spent $300 billion on this DCPS with very little return. Please tell me that the people who oversaw that are not going to oversee this. Please tell me that those people are no longer with Social Security, please.
Mr. Klopp is new, and he has a new team supervising DCPS, and they have, in resetting the program, they created a single owner, which was one of the recommendations. So the original folks are not really involved.
But they're still there.
They're still there. I don't really know. I can't speak to every single person.
Do we hold people accountable for $300 billion failures? I'm just curious.
We, in the IG world, we certainly report that and are very concerned about that. As far as what SSA management does, I can't speak to that.
I yield. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Dole, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and I apologize for being late, but certainly appreciate you taking your time. I'd like to follow up on some similar questions, because I think this is the thing that people are scratching their heads saying, what in the world? Mr. Klopp, you've been with the Social Security Administration for 18 months. Where were you before that?
I'm sort of a Silicon Valley guy. I bounced around some of startup companies and technology companies all over.
Perfect. So let's put your private sector hat on, and let's consider this a board meeting. And we understand how important Social Security is, absolutely vital, and the fact that we're looking at a database here that's basically out of date. We're still working on COBOL. And if we sat around a board of directors meeting here and you spent $300 million to be where we are today, what do you think a board would do based on the results that have been produced thus far?
Well, so the previous project, where $300 million was spent, and we didn't get much out of it, I believe that the board would be very unhappy and there would be some heads that would roll.
I find it also interesting that as of just a week before this hearing, we hadn't received more than about 3 slides on what the plan of attack is going forward for this. And so I'm just wondering in terms of the detailed plan going forward, and I recognize you've got a monumental task in front of you. So please hear me. We want you to be wildly successful. I just want to make sure that we're giving you the tools to be successful, because we can't be back here going through another hearing like this after wasting taxpayer dollars to come up with something that's not going to be functional. Tell me about the plan. Is it adequate?
So I believe that it is adequate. I think that I mean, there's lots behind the plan. The fact is the plan is, 20 pages. I think, as I mentioned earlier, we have briefed your staff multiple times. So as the plan evolved, they've been briefed on it as it evolved. There's not very much in the plan that we had not briefed your staff on as it evolved, with the exception of the financial models. And by the way, I probably owe them a briefing to walk through in detail exactly how we came up with those plans, and to be able to help them share the confidence that I share that the financials that we put together are actually accurate and supportable. So I think we're there. I do believe it.
Well, that's certainly good news. So in your estimation, how long is it going to take to implement so we're going to actually have an updated system over at Social Security Administration?
So using these agile methods, what we believe is that in each of the 5 areas that I talked about, Title II, Title 16, et cetera, that we're going to be able to work to deploy some parts of the system in production in pretty short order once we get funded and get started. Where the definition of short order is, it should not exceed a year. I will tell you that the users have something to say about when we've built enough stuff to be sufficient to actually roll into production. So this is part of Agile, is I can't say exactly when I roll the first bit in production. But our experience with the restart of DCPS is that we should be able to roll significant functionality, modern functionality, into production in the agency within a year of starting.
The team that was responsible before, that apparently is still over at the Social Security Administration, that didn't produce the system, and the team that you're assembling, do you have the team that you need, or is it still some of the folks that didn't get the job done last time that you're relying upon?
So it's interesting, the last time we did this, for reasons that are historical and go so far back before my time, I actually I haven't even heard the stories, right? Because it goes back to 2008. The decisions in 2008 were made that this system would not be built by SSA's systems department. This was built completely by contractors, and it was managed more directly by the business than by systems. Now, that doesn't say that we weren't, we knew what was going on, and we provided a little bit of financial oversight and stuff like that, so I wouldn't sit here and say that we, had no skin in the game, but we were not the primary drivers in that system. So what we're now doing is driving this new plan through SSA's systems organization, and so it is fundamentally different people.
Okay, delighted to hear that. Ms. Bird, Ms. Melvin, just turning to you for a second. Both your organizations have conducted some pretty extensive oversight in the area of the IT modernization. How important is it, in your estimation, for the SSA to have a detailed plan in place? And is the plan that has been provided sufficient, in your estimation?
So we only received the plan 2 days ago. Mr. Klopp was very kind to brief my staff for a couple hours last evening. I can't really opine on the adequacy of the plan. We will be happy to take a deeper dive and get with you at a later date. As far as the importance of this, the IG has gone back many, many years recommending that these changes be made, that the 60 million lines of COBOL be modernized. So we clearly believe that we're at a critical point. Technology changes every single day. So we can't wait. we have people retiring, we have a new generation coming in. So it's imperative, in our opinion.
And from my perspective, also, we only recently saw the plan, so I can only speak preliminarily. Based on what I'm seeing, I would certainly have questions about the content and what exists behind the slides that we've all spoken to today. When I speak in particular about the cost estimation, I think there's some important questions to be asked there relative to what information and analysis is underlying the cost figure that's included in the plan. The GAO cost estimation guide identifies a number of characteristics of what we call comprehensive, well-documented, accurate, and credible cost estimations. So from our perspective, it would be extremely important to know more about what exactly supports the figures that are being presented in this plan, how they're justified, and what analysis is there to support that.
Great, thank you. My time has expired, but let me just close by saying we need you to get this right, and we want this to be successful. The country's counting upon it. Yield back.
Thank you. And listen, I appreciate y'all testifying today, and keep up the good work. It seems like it's a never-ending problem to fix this. And, you know, we built 2 new facilities with computer systems in them, and seems like we should have gotten it fixed then, but we didn't. So I just want to thank y'all for your testimony and thank the member that's left.
Mr. Chairman, can I add something before you close?
Yes.
So I think we're beginning to recognize how important it is to try to be with them as we try to stay on top of them. That those 2 centers that were built, my understanding is those were hardware. Those gave you more infrastructure capacity, but your issues are more software and the interconnectivity and all the issues that come with making use of that better hardware you have, and Cobalt and all the rest. That's software. What we have to do is make sure that we now complement what you have now in your hardware with up to speed, up to date software, and it can be pretty tricky and complex, and I think that's where it's going to be really important that you have some eyes from outside of the system watching you as well. But, Mr. Chairman, I think this is clearly one of those areas where if we just sort of stay on top of it ourselves, we'll have a greater comfort level about where to go with this proposal that they've put forward. And
well, Social Security's aging, and outdated IT is a real problem. So I think it's time to fix the systems, and I appreciate y'all taking that effort. How to get it done. Social Security has to get it right the first time, because we can't keep throwing money at it. And the American people deserve no less, and I thank each and every one of you for being here and for helping with this, resolve this problem. Thank you so much, and with that, the subcommittee stands adjourned.